We're going to talk about clinical trials. And we have kind of like the different parts of this whole thing. We should probably, I mean, we don't have like industry and the FDA and all this sort of stuff, but we kind of have a little bit of it up there, okay, where it kind of like starts. And they didn't really know exactly what kind of hot seat I was going to put them on, and so they're like being really amazing good guests. This isn't a dating game, sorry, Annabelle. They heard your fish story. We'll have to try other questions. Okay, so I just kind of want to say, I just kind of want to like set the tone, because this is kind of like the pace. Jackie, smile. Okay, this is going to be just painless. Okay, we love that you're here. Okay, and all right, I didn't see, if you don't smile, I'm going to tell them. Okay, all right. So let me introduce you guys, because Jackie hasn't been up here yet. Okay, you've met these amazing doctors and the brilliance that's up here. But this here is who we call the amazing KRAS Jackie. And before there was the KRAS Kickers, there was a KRAS Jackie. Now, KRAS Jackie was 33 when you were diagnosed? 33? Okay, so I'm going to tell her story, because she's going to stand here and sit here and be an amazing person. Okay, so Jackie was 33 years old. She was pregnant with her second kid, and she got diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. You had to take that baby early. That was 8 years ago? Just over 8 years ago. You had what % chance of being alive a year?
Well, back then they would say 3, 5%, you know, those kind of statistics, but, you know, they're delayed statistics, right?
So when you were first diagnosed, you had about 3% chance of being alive a year. And you're here today.
It might have been 5 year, like
5 years?
5
okay,
year.
all right, well, all right, 5 years, okay. And you're here today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearly, right? Okay, we can all agree, right? You're here today. Okay, and you're here today in part because of not necessarily just it's not like she was just jumping from clinical trial to clinical trial, but because you took in your own care, and the reason they called her KRAS Jackie is because not everybody was told like what their biomarkers were and what have you, and obviously a 33-year-old pregnant woman, by the way, we have the exact same, we have KRAS G12D. I mean, this is not like what they're looking for of any sort. And so they find this out, and so they're like, well, why do you have this, and what have you? And so you have had to go through a number of treatments, and in order to do that, you've had to advocate for yourself. And you have, she's had to be able to understand what these different things are, and spreadsheets and what have you. And so, but we're not gonna make this hard.
No, I'm good.
Okay, we're not gonna make this hard. But in the time that you've been going through this, 8 years, tell me what you've seen in research and what you've been through.
Well, I mean, when I was first diagnosed, the only option I had was, you know, first-line chemotherapy, because originally I did not have, you know, the big 3 mutations. They didn't know what mutation I had. They only tested for EGFR, ALK, and I think RAS1 at the time. So they didn't really know what mutation I had, and we delivered my son, and then they just put me right on chemotherapy, and I actually had pretty good response to that for about 18 months. So I had like a long time to really like adjust to the fact of having cancer, and like, see, I can't talk in that microphone.
You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Let me hold it for you.
Okay, so at some point it clicked, and I just started, and I started doing like, you know, my own research of like, you know, what I do next, because there really isn't good options for me. And that's when I started, I found like a nonprofit group that I talked to. I got like aligned with a specific person, and she's a scientist, and we've gotten really close since then. And see, I can't, why did you put me up here?
The reason I put you up here is because you're an absolute inspiration to me, and because I'm gonna upset you. I'm gonna let you go sit down, but I'm gonna tell your story then. Okay, but
the bottom line is that I sift through clinical trials pretty much every couple of months. I've been doing it for years now. I know which trials are not relevant to me. just by looking at exclusion criteria, what treatments I've already been through, which is a lot. And, you know, I'll have like a few that I know that possibly are relevant. I'll search up, you know, what the drugs are, because obviously they're all numbers, and then I'll look at some of the, you know, preclinical information, and then if I think that it's something that's relevant, I'll bounce it off my scientist friend, and then if I'll have like a short list of trials that I'm considering, and then if I get to the point in my treatment where I think I need to, you know, start a new trial or a new treatment, I will then talk to my oncologist about it, and if I don't get the answer that I want from them, I will go to a different oncologist, or I will go directly to the trial sites that I'm looking at and at least consult with them and get my foot in the door and have them have all my stuff ahead of time, so that if the time comes when I want to switch, I can just have like a seamless transition, and that's it.
And it's keeping you here, and you set the tone for everything that we've been able to do. And I want you to know that, first of all, the idea of her being up here, she's just like, please don't make me, please don't. She's like, you want me to do this?
I should have taken public speaking classes in my youth.
I hated public speaking, so what's that tell you about me?
Yeah.
But you're just amongst friends here. Mm-hmm. Okay, these are our people. This is all friends. And we're not going to make you uncomfortable, because the only reason we could even conceive of coming together is because you were like, well, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then I did this, and I was like, this is like the smartest person I've ever met. And it was like, and because she took such, it was so intentional about her choices and looking at what needed to be done, and all while she had a little one. Like, remember, she still had that baby, and then she had an older one too, okay? And it makes me want to know how we can keep going and keep doing, so that when you're 90 years old, you know, your kids are like, yeah, well, they called her KRAS Jackie. And, you know, and that's where it's going to be what it is, and your family's just going to be like, well, yeah, it was just one other thing that she had to do, and yeah, well, whatever, okay? Because that's how our kids always are.
That's how they are.
That's totally how they are. You know, they're like, oh, yeah, well, whatever, okay, yeah, but I need to get my nails done and go to Lululemon. But, okay, but I want you to know that you really, truly are not just like what we all need to be doing, okay? But she was doing this before there was anything to be done with it, okay? And it wasn't, I mean, now there's like 400 plus clinical trials for KRAS, and at that time, they're like, it was undruggable, not just like, oh, that's a cutesy name, but literally completely undruggable. And by the way, G12D, we don't have any pills. We've got a whole bunch of stuff that's in trials that they're working on and things coming. And so when I talk about like hope, I mean, this is literally the hope that we need to get going. And, you know, this is me, but younger, and I'm like, y'all need to keep doing, you guys, doctors, pharma, wherever you are, and the people that are here and around, because we need to, this isn't the 90-something-year-old person I thought was going to be diagnosed with lung cancer. This is us. This is us. And we need to be strategic about it. But you can just sit here. I'm not going to make you talk anymore. If you, okay, just sit here and just look pretty for me so I don't have an empty chair. Yep. Okay, thank you. Yep.
Sorry.
I won't even make you hold a microphone. I'm that confident in it. So you can just sit back there and just relax. Okay, and you can just be like our patient perspective. Okay. All right, so that's where I kind of came at this from. But Janning, okay, you have no idea how bad I felt that we had to cut you short, because you really do such a phenomenal job setting the tone for research and what that looks like and stuff. So would you give me like the 2-minute version of what a KRAS is, like just, I know without slides, just you know, what do they call it, like, just like off the cuff, or, huh? okay, a quick synopsis. Okay, I was looking for a more fun word, but okay, synopsis will work. Okay, so quick synopsis of like, the 2-minute like KRAS is, and then after it leaves, you find something, and it's like, okay, it's ready to go. How do we get it down to these doctors? How do we get it down to this clinical trial? I mean, when does it leave your hands? What happens? First the synopsis and then go.
2 minutes, huh?
No. Was it a big ask? Take as much time as you need.
Okay, KRAS is the key gene that's mutated and causing lung, colorectal, and pancreatic cancer. And so we spend decades of research trying to understand how it does it, to identify its vulnerabilities. We then exploit those vulnerabilities to develop drugs to then block KRAS function. We then go through more years and years of research, and hopefully it looks promising, and then we hand it off to these guys, and they hopefully prove that what we found in our research actually is predictive of what will happen in the patient.
How long does that take? Like the first thing, like the G12C inhibitor, how long did that actually take? They thought they found something, not just the pocket part. How long did it actually take?
So the G12C inhibitor is an interesting story because it was a discovery that nobody expected to find. And I think that's a great example of bringing new perspectives to the field. So Kayvon Shokat was not a classical RAS person, but Frank McCormick at UCF says that you got to study this, you got to study this. So he finally convinced Kayvon to take a look at it. He takes a look at it because he's not in the field. He is not burdened by a lot of the perspectives and biases and earlier concepts that perhaps sometimes put us experts in a box that we cannot escape. So he's free to think in a crazier way than most of us are allowed to. And because of that, he does something that most of us would have said, Kayvon, you're crazy. But he did it, and that is actually the discovery that exploded the field.
And that was it. I should know off the top of my head. I'm getting a sunburn here.
Yeah.
That was 2012, correct? Was it 2012, I think?
2013.
13, okay,
Yes.
2013.
Yes.
Okay, so there's 2013, and they didn't get the AMG 510, and I know, was it 2018?
2018 was then, and Amgen was the first to go to clinic, and they started first evaluation of AMG 510.
Okay. Now, how did he find his pocket differently than what you were looking at? Was he more biological, more chemical? How does...
So, Kayvon is a brilliant person, but also some degree of luck came into that as well, because he had no idea that that would be there as well.
Right.
He just decided to take a strategy, and it discovered something that nobody knew was there. To some degree, it's serendipity, and some of the greatest scientific discoveries were simply things that happen, not because we're that smart, but because we kept trying and trying different things. And sometimes a little luck comes into play and something falls into our lap. That is a great example of something that sort of fell into Kayvon's lap and broke the field wide open.
Kind of similar to what we heard with Jackie's story, a little bit of luck,
Yeah.
a little bit of strategy,
Yeah.
and just kept plugging away.
A lot of perseverance as well.
A lot of perseverance, and you just kind of had to put to the side. We're not looking at the numbers. We're not going to look at this. We're going to just do what we got to do to get to the next.
Exactly. So the phenotype of researchers is that we're used to failing. And so it does not deter us. Instead, it challenges to say, let's try something else, or let's try a different approach, or let's think about it differently. So we failed a lot, but we kept trying. We tried different approaches, and fortunately, with time, something worked.
Absolutely. Okay, so you find something, and it's like, okay, we've got things moving on. What happens? How do you get it over to the next level? I know it's not a simple thing. No, you don't have to 2
Yes.
minutes. You just go ahead and Like, walk us through a little bit.
Well, so the first part is to identify a chemical molecule that does what we hope it does, which is to block RAS function. Then we have a whole series of additional steps that we have to take. We don't just take our molecule and just say, let's put it in people. That is potentially dangerous. It's potentially unethical. And so we have to go through many additional steps to convince ourselves that this might actually work in patients. So that involves studies with cell cultures of cancer cell lines. It involves studying models of cancer, such as mouse models of cancer. We keep doing those type of studies, and we hopefully find support that this might actually work in a patient. But as we all know, mice are not just small people, and a lot of drugs that have worked in mice simply have failed to translate to the patient. There's a quote by Judah Folkman, who discovered angiogenesis, about mice. And he said that if you're a mouse and you have cancer, we can take great care of you. And he said that because we have discovered many great molecules that will cure cancer in mice that disappointingly have failed when we've taken it to humans. So, but that's the best we have, and we do those studies, and hopefully then the FDA concludes, okay, we're convinced you have something interesting here, and then we hand it off to people to then evaluate it in patients.
Mice don't get the same side effects we have either, do they? Like, I mean, was it mice don't throw up, right? So, I mean, so like there's a few challenges there. So, okay, so you find it, we do something about it, and now we're handing it off. Dr. Puniker. So like we're gonna say it's like, okay, so you get something from them now. How does it walk us through that? Like not super intently, just kind of like walk us through like high level so we have a little bit better understanding.
Yeah, so the way that I think I turned it on. Oh, there we go. So the way that process works is that, so generally trials come to me in one of two ways. Either there's some science that I'm really excited about, and I hear about it, I'll reach out to a company and say, hey, we really want to open this trial, and then I'll go through the preclinical data, assess to see if it's worthwhile, and then I'll open the trial. Or the second way is that a particular company might come to me and say, hey, you've done a bunch of these trials in this space, what do you feel about this? And then I'll do the same thing, kind of look through all their data and make a determination if it's worthwhile. I'll tell you that there is a lot of error in that. If you've heard of like venture capitalists who invest in companies, right? Good venture capitalists will tell you about the companies that they declined that ended up being billion-dollar companies. And so I've done the same. I have declined drugs because I have said, you know what, there's not enough data here for me to think it's worthwhile. And they've ended up being good drugs. They've thankfully gone elsewhere and continued their development. And I've also done the opposite. I've accepted drugs because they cure cancer in mice, right? And it's been amazing. It's like, oh my God, they've never seen anything like this. We give it to humans, and all of a sudden they have side effects that are unexpected. I'll give you a really great example. CAR T cells. So CAR T cells are a type of immunotherapy. We have developed a type of T cell for KRAS mutations as well. But one of the biggest side effects is something called CRS, cytokine release syndrome. Mice don't get that. They just don't get it. And so for years in mice, people were like, oh my God, this is amazing. You give it to patients, like, wait a minute, why does this patient have a fever? Why is their blood pressure so low? Why is this happening? And then only now do we understand that mice are not good models for everything. And knowing what mice are good models for and not is a big part of the challenge. So fast forward a little bit. So then we get the trial. And then once we do the trial, so I focus generally on first in human trials. So try to put the first humans ever on these trials. And we watch patients like hawks, like, you got anything? Tell me. You sneezing? Tell me. Really anything, like, because we need to know. Because those first few patients, if they have something, that determines the future of that trial. That determines how we evaluate other people who are going to be on that trial in the coming weeks and months and years.
So it's a bad idea for us to lie to you.
Yeah, don't lie to an oncologist. It's not good for you. It's not good for us. So one thing that's kind of interesting that I've never seen this in any other field, but the FDA, interestingly, holds oncologists or principal investigators personally responsible for all aspects of a clinical trial. So I cannot go to the FDA and say, oh, well, my staff screwed this up. Oh, the patient lied to me. Oh, this happened. Like, the FDA is going to be like, don't care. Goodbye, right? It's actually very interesting. Like, the FDA will come after Salman Punegar, not after NYU. It's really kind of scary. So please don't lie to me if you ever come see me.
Well, and I think that's part of it, is because on behalf of myself and other people I've talked to, I think the biggest fear is that my doctor's going to give up on me before I want to give up. And so I pull back sometimes because I'm tough. I can do this. I got this. I'm okay. And it's like, and at the same time, I only have you for 10 minutes. What am I going to be able to prioritize? And so it's really important for us to know that we're not just doing that and just being there and you're like, ugh, there's whiny Terry again. You want to hear it so that you can actually record it and you can be looking out for other things.
Yeah, but also keep in mind, I think somebody had talked about this earlier. Dosing for clinical trials is somewhat arbitrary. So the way that we dose clinical trials, we do tests in mice, we figure out what dose should be tested first in humans. I think, Annabelle, you talked about this, right? We try to get to the maximum tolerated dose. And then there's something called a minimum tolerated dose, right? Or, sorry, minimum effective dose. And we try to get somewhere in between those two. The point is, osimertinib, Tagrisso, is given at 80 milligrams. That is a blanket 80 milligrams for anybody who walks into an oncologist's office, right? That doesn't mean that everybody needs 80 milligrams. So if you have side effects at 80, you dropping down to 60 milligrams doesn't necessarily mean that's going to be less effective for you. And so there's a lot of nuance there. So, I actually hear this a lot where patients will not want to tell me their side effects because they're afraid I'm going to pull them off of the trial. But it's really for the patient's benefit, right? Like, if I truly believe that it's unsafe, then I will pull somebody off of a trial. But it's in my benefit and the patient's benefit to stay on as long as possible while remaining safe.
Can I ask you a question about that? This is an issue I think is very important because it leads to underreporting, and that is part of the communication of the landscape. Do you tell patients that they may be effective at different doses? Because that was something that wasn't expressed to me. In trials, do you, I mean, even when reporting in terms of, because on a trial, you can lower the dose.
Yeah, absolutely. So in trials, we lower the doses. We even increase doses as well. So
But
all of that's possible.
do you tell people at the outset that is possible?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm a roadmap kind of oncologist, like that person you met, and I will sit down with people and say, like, if you don't know anything about clinical trials, you are going to learn it here. And over the course of the next few weeks, you will basically have a PhD in clinical trials because that's the only way this is going to work. I'm going to throw all this information at you, and you are going to get it. And we're going to figure out a way that we can make this work. But yeah, that's very important to know that, right? Just because you're on a clinical trial at a certain dose doesn't mean you're going to stay at that dose. Doesn't mean that's the right dose for you.
Okay, but that's very true. And at the same time, all right, so we're just gonna jump over, okay, now you're on the hot seat, Dr. Fallis. Okay, and so the question to you, it's like somebody comes in, they're just newly diagnosed, we're gonna pick lung cancer, your area of specialty, and they get diagnosed with lung cancer, and what information is it you're looking for to strategically make the decisions, not necessarily for first-line treatment, but where, like, say, a phase 1, 2, 3 trial might fall in? What is that actual decision tree?
Yeah, okay, good, it's working. All right. I think the first thing is, so whenever I'm meeting someone new, certainly just getting to know them. right? So a lot of times I like to ask about what are kind of hobbies, things we like to do for fun, family, just to get to understand and know. That's why I went into medicine was, I think one of my mentors when I was shadowing, this was in high school. I had an interest. I was like, this is something I think a field I'd like to go into. And he told me the goal of medicine is to prevent and relieve suffering. And I think that really stuck with me. And so I went in, and certainly I found in college, having kind of studied biochemistry, molecular biology, had an interest in the science of things, but I never left the patient side as well. And I think certainly seeing even family members with cancer, how you navigate that process, it's confusing. Every center has different policies, timelines in terms of how you get in. It's very confusing and complicated, and even I get confused myself sometimes. So the first part is I like to at least try to get to know my patient, hopefully develop a relationship so we can kind of feel comfortable with each other. I think that's really important. Certainly, I think you might have mentioned, second opinions as well. I think you want to be comfortable with who you're with, and I think that's always the most important. So I'm always kind of very open and encourage kind of just having that comfort level. And so developing to understand what are the goals, what are we hoping for, what are kind of, how do we live our life, what are our preferences. And so, from a cancer standpoint, just staging first, so we kind of want to get the diagnosis. So if we have lung cancer, I do see patients before we necessarily get that lung cancer diagnosis. So I know every center is different. I will see some patients who have a lung mass and we're concerned. Sometimes I'm able to get them in very quickly. Same thing, we have kind of a policy and timeline of getting our patients in, making sure they get the care they need, making sure we go quickly. And sometimes, unfortunately, we can go a little faster than primary care. And so we can kind of get some things pushed up quicker, getting PET scans done faster. So getting that diagnosis and then understanding, okay, what is the stage? So now we have primary lung cancer, let's say non-small cell lung cancer. Where has that cancer traveled to? What stage are we looking at? So if we're talking about stage 4 metastatic, my first thought always does jump into clinical trials. And so part of that is comprehensive biomarker testing, so we understand what is appropriate. Because our standard in metastatic is chemotherapy, or it's immunotherapy with or without chemo if we don't have any driver mutations. But if we do, we know that in some cases EGFR, ALK, we might not respond as well. So we want to know if we have targeted therapy, and that's kind of that first step that I think of in terms of what is going to be an appropriate trial. In terms of phases, I don't know if I'm talking too much, so just tell me to stop. But phase 1, certainly we're looking at safety.
Yeah.
I tend to think of phase 1 is not typically the first line study we're looking at. So someone who's newly diagnosed, if we feel like we have an efficacious treatment, it's not always the first line step, but it's something where our patients are more resistant or refractory because we don't technically know if it's safe or efficacious.
Where would you suggest a clinical trial in a patient, just average patient like your Mr. KRAS that walked in?
I think so. Any trial that I feel like at our institution that we open, we believe in. So that's why in terms of if we have a clinical trial, then I think it's appropriate at any point. Part of it too is understanding what are the goals with the trial. So if we have, say, a stage 1A lung cancer that we're very hopeful for cure with surgical resection, we want to be very confident that a clinical trial we think will improve that. And so that's where we have a process for approval for clinical trials as well, where we go not just on, hey, I think this clinical trial will work, but we look as a center as a whole. So it's kind of between myself as a medical oncologist, we have our radiation oncologist, our surgeons, and we all kind of develop that portfolio of, do we think that this will work? And you're right, we have some hits and we have some misses, but we want to go in thinking that we're going to put our best foot forward. We think this will help. So when we're thinking about a condition that is not curable, so that's oftentimes metastatic lung cancer, I think a clinical trial from the get-go is always certainly appropriate. I think earlier on it is still appropriate, but we tend to be a bit more rigorous because we're talking about a curative intent therapy. So we want to make sure what we're doing does still give us that best chance towards cure.
Okay, what would you say your best hack is? One hack you want to give to a patient, okay, about clinical trials. Because I'll give you let me give you an example. Mm-hmm. Okay, the hack I would give somebody as an example to find a clinical trial, go to that facility's website and see what clinical trials are available there. That's the fastest, easiest way to see what's there. Clinicaltrials.gov, lovely, but it's just overwhelming. You're not going to find everything that's there. That's one hacks I have. What is something that, if you need a second to think, I'll take anybody. Jackie, do you have one? I'm not going to make you talk if you don't want to, but I'll give you the microphone if you have a hack.
I use the clinicaltrials.gov, but I use the advanced search, and and I limit, I'm going through a period of time. I actually have, like, the last time I checked, I have the date, and then I will check the first posted date, and I'll check every single trial that's been added to clinicaltrial.gov in that time frame, and I will actually go through and cross them off, and it really does eliminate most of them. So that's my hack, but I've been at it a while.
Well, yeah, and you've been around longer than most of those trials. You have a hack suggestion, you guys?
I guess, so I'm trying to think of hacks in a sense. So just from an institutional perspective, when we're talking about targeted therapy, we do have a molecular tumor board. So every patient who has next-generation sequencing, we do have a tumor board. We have a group that does look at available clinical trials. So that's always kind of one first step that I think for maybe some more, if you're a more general oncologist or in the community, that's something that is linked to the whole system. So it does kind of upfront let a lot of our providers know what is available. I think honestly asking too is important. Certainly I think I might be thinking about it, but it's important to ask, which I can understand is tough. It is hard to kind of bring that up sometimes and ask that question, but I certainly agree, and I think that last conversation that we had was certainly always helpful and interesting to listen to, but I think certainly asking your provider as well, hey, do you know of any clinical trials?
Kachapoon.
Yeah, my hack is just reach out to the oncologist directly. So if you go on clinicaltrials.gov, it'll tell you who the principal investigator is. For most of my clinical trials, my email is listed on there. If it's not, it's pretty easy to figure out what somebody's email address is. And if you just send them an email, if you think about it, who cares the most about that clinical trial? It's the principal investigator. Who is the most interested in seeing that clinical trial be successful? It's that same person. So if you reach out to them, more often than not, they will respond to you, tell you if you're a candidate, and if you're not, they'd be happy to refer you to somebody who may be better able to help you. I'll give you an example. A lot of people reach out to me for the RMC 6236 trial. And I will tell them, like, oh, well, actually, you have a G12C mutation. We're not accepting G12C mutations on this trial. However, we have these other clinical trials that we can consider you for. So definitely, I would do that.
And what does it take for you guys to share the KRAS Kickers with those people that reach out to you?
What do you mean?
Tell them about us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. No socks for you.
No,
yeah.
no. Well, okay, so in seriousness, I will tell you that I get a lot of patients who say, oh, I heard on KRAS Kickers that there's a new, I'm not even kidding, I swear. They'll say, there's a new clinical trial. Can I go on that clinical trial?
Okay, well, I'll take that as an endorsement.
I've even had patients tell me, like, oh, on KRAS Kickers, I saw that somebody was using XYZ treatment for their rash. What do you think about that?
So it's working, y'all. We really are really making a difference, okay? Because that's really, and how does that make you feel about, is that like, oh, geez, what are they up to now? Or, is that okay with you?
No, my view is that I think every patient should be as well informed as possible. So the more information people have, it's just going to make their lives better, and it's going to make my life better too, right? If there's more support for somebody, that means that there are multiple facets that person's getting support, and not just from me and my team.
Well, and just so you know that, so you guys know, I ask your teams, I ask you guys that when you get information, you see information, whether it's an article, it's a poster, it's a presentation or whatever, just whether you're dropping it in an email to me or tagging us on Twitter, X, or whatever, okay, just taking that piece of information, it's like I'm taking and dropping it in the Facebook group, okay? And the Facebook group, most of us are connected to the Facebook group, but we also have on the website, but the hot information, hot off the press, is what hits that main Facebook group of the KRAS Kickers. So, but maybe we should give you like a bag of socks or something, take and hand out. I think he earned socks, you guys, all right? Okay, all right, okay. And you Jackie had one?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, if you don't want to use clinicaltrials.gov because it is kind of a pain in the butt, there are third-party nonprofit companies out there that you can get matched with. The KRAS Kickers has a listing of clinical trials for KRAS, but even more so, if you just want to look at lung cancer trials or colorectal or pancreatic that are not KRAS specific. There are plenty of places out there that you can get matched and they can help you find clinical trials, at least to narrow down if you don't know where to start.
Do you have anything else?
Oh, no, it's just something from earlier. But I agree. I think the access we have is pretty amazing. Things that we didn't have. My grandfather had melanoma before. Really, we had a lot of immunotherapy, a lot of access to care. So there was a lot of unknown in how we're following these things. And it just made me think. I had a patient that, so since we use magic mouthwash, if you've heard of that, like a numbing solution to help if you're having kind of sore throat, oftentimes related to our treatments, whether that's chemotherapy or radiation. But there was a shortage of viscous lidocaine. And so that's part of the key ingredients that we mix together. And I had a patient who had gone on to a forum that found how to mix that over the counter. And then they shared it with me so I could share it to more patients. So I love it whenever we kind of have kind of things or those hacks or things to help. So I think it's certainly... That's right.
So you're telling me the magic mouthwash is not really magic?
I wish.
Huh? Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, so, all right, it starts with you and the research, okay? And then it ends up in a beautiful patient like Jackie, okay? Beautiful kicker, we're not patients. And I still do call it journey, it's a path that I didn't choose to be on, but it is a journey. What is it you would like to say to this group of people, Dr. Durr?
I'm impressed with the ability of the people here to seek as much information as they can, and I think that's great. I'm very impressed with how knowledgeable people are. The level of conversations that I've had with people in terms of the science they understand is quite amazing, and I think that's great to seek that information because that's the way you're going to make the best decisions for yourself.
Truly, patient empowerment is really what we're all about. And so from this, we were going to go and we're going to do a breakout sessions. There's going to be like a little snack over there. And we were going to do like care partners in one room and what? You have a question? I will do that. Hang on. I was telling what's next. Hang on. Okay. Jeez, you marry the guy he thinks he has the right to talk. We'll get there. But we're gonna like a little snack will be coming. If it's not here already, it'll be coming around, and then we're just gonna break out and we're gonna do. I don't know how many. We're gonna do care partners in one room and patients the other. Not because we've got secret stuff to say to the other people, but because I know that sometimes it's just nice to be able to just be and not have to put up my little bit of extra wall or whatever, and can just like really let down my hair. But that's kind of what's next, and then I'll close out the section if you guys aren't sick of listening to me talk. But I have got to say that you guys, I mean, when I say like the first-rate team up here, I am not just like arbitrarily saying that. I mean, you guys, remember early on, if you missed it, when I first started, I talked about how you get diagnosed with cancer, and it's like the manure in the garden, and you got to dig around in it, and it's nothing that you really wanted, but we're just trying to do the best we can by throwing stuff down and trying to make something like grow out of it and what have you. And it just really, hope grows out of that crap. Out of that mulch grows. But it does take some genomics. That's what the gnomes were for, genomics. Oh. It takes, you were wondering, weren't you? It takes digging around in the garden a lot with like the genomics to really know what it is we need to gnome. And I'm sorry. I'll be having coffee shortly. Yes, I am. Whoever said that, yes, I'm tired. But but I want you guys to know, I really appreciate that. And I would like all four of you guys to grab a gnome today. And take it home with you. Take home a gnome. Okay, that was too much coffee? No, okay, no, I want you guys to take home a gnome. And if you haven't seen like the frog tattoos, the KRAS Kicker frog tattoos, grab them, take them home for your kids. Okay, Maureen's over here And the part of it was supposed to be, okay, and I have like these grand dreams in my head, like the gnomes were like the digging around, and I really don't want to think of a doctor looking like a gnome or a dwarf, and I really didn't feel like I identified with that as a patient. Like, you know, Annabelle didn't identify with the dead fish. I kind of felt a little bit more like the frog, and even though the frog, the frog is supposed to be, you know, like a combined force of research, of doctors, of clinicians, jumping and leaping and looking and trying to catch what bugs us and really doing what it takes. And so that's why we have the little frog logo. But thank you guys for doing this, and thank you for being here, and keep doing what you're doing. And you guys are the best. And Chris, did you want to say something?
I just
And I'd like to introduce my husband. This is Chris. And Chris is always a volunteer, sometimes a voluntold, and really, truly does run around and do everything for us. Yes, Chris, you have something to say.
I do. I wanted to thank the doctors for being here. I know they do this out of the goodness of their hearts. They travel here, and they've given up their Saturday, Friday night and Saturday just for us. So personally, I want to personally thank you guys for taking the time to do this, and all the stuff you guys do to make a difference to every one of us here. I think you guys are all the heroes. You guys are the ones wearing the capes. I say it all the time. Thank you personally for what you're doing.